All right, folks, welcome back to Talkin' Soccer. I'm your host, Justin Horniker, and today we're going to talk about how the U.S. advanced to the knockout stage off a 1-0 victory that was tense throughout most of the match that saw the U.S. move on over Iran. It was a little bit refreshing once the match got started, and we'll talk about kind of all the greater implications as we make our way through the entirety of this match. But it was nice after all the tensions with as I'm sure all of you have seen by now, the reporter standoff between Iranian journalist and Tyler Adams, and of course they also asked that line of questioning to Walker Zimmerman and Tim Ream as well, and Greg Berhalter as well, just to kind of come off of yesterday where tensions were high, not just, from the media and the fans to the governments as well, off of the social media posts put out by U.S. Soccer in the lead up to this match. But it was refreshing at the start to see, and, from what I've heard from people there in Qatar as well, that, the fans for the most part were jovial. There's a lot of coordination between U.S. and Iranian fans. And I think it just goes to show that, for the most part, the people of the U.S., the people of Iran, especially in the soccer fandom, outside of politics, because America's a big country, Iran's a big country. But as far as we have a lot of common ground, we see things similar, and the people want something different than the Iranian regime wants. So you have to, come into this game knowing that the people and the fans, the women and the fans, are doing something extremely powerful by just being visible, by wearing their shirts that speak power to the women's revolution that's going on in Iran right now. So with that being said, let's get into the game. We kind of have that backdrop. So then it kind of tells you the tension that was being felt before the match. Match kicks off, and you definitely feel that tension as well, especially as Iran kind of come out a little bit more fired up. They come out a little bit more on the ball, a little bit sharper than the U.S. were, especially at the start. But fortunately, the U.S. were able to grow into this game. And I thought the first half of the U.S. was fantastic. I think they were a little bit unlucky to not score a second goal, as we saw from the Tim Weah goal at the end of the half. But if you look at the XG stats, U.S. had 0.86 expected goals to Iran's 0. They kept Iran essentially chanceless throughout the first half, playing a nice, expansive form of soccer that leads into the first goal that we see, which is an over-the-top ball to Sergiño Dest, who's able to pull it down, heads it to a Christian Pulisic, who is making a late arriving run. Something I said in my video last week that is what I love from Christian Pulisic, is he does those later arriving runs into the box so well. And it's so infuriating when he's the only one taking corners and free kicks because of how terrible he is at them. But late arriving run, he heads the ball clean into the net, but unfortunately collides with the Iranian goalkeeper. So he collides with Biranvand, and both of them go down, but Pulisic stays down for a long, long time, and it looks like he kind of took a knee to a sensitive area, and he's taken off the pitch. He's kept off the pitch for a while before eventually making his way back on to end the half. But you could see that he was in pain, especially as they were talking to him in the halftime. They kind of had him halftime mix zone interview, and he sounded labored, that's for sure. Slight addendum from the editing chair, so I'll post this tweet here. Christian Pulisic actually in the hospital after the game with an abdominal injury. Ugh. Anyway, we ride. U.S. also had some decent chances throughout that first half. There's a Tim Weah header that probably could have been taken a little bit better. There's also a Pulisic header from around the same spot where you're kind of you're in that in-between spot where you're not at the edge of the box, but you're into the box. However, it's a ball, both of these two were balls that didn't necessarily have a lot of weight behind them. So as you head them, you're not putting a lot of force behind it, and the keeper has a lot of time to kind of get up and recover. Everything else was, kept to kind of the periphery. Josh Sargent had a shot that went way wide, but he was pretty good tonight as well. Sergiño Dest took a couple shots from on the outside of the box, as well as Yunus Musa had a couple attempts, free kick in the second half, as well as a ball 9 minutes into the first that just kind of skied on him. So I thought, especially in the first half, the U.S. played fantastic. If you were to end the game at the first, just like in the Wales game, you'd have nothing but praises to say about this team. Unfortunately, the first half has to end. but ends on a good note. US are up 1-0. They're this close to a Tim Weah second goal. And let's talk about that second goal that wasn't to be for a minute, because I have some gripes with the Fox studio in that. So it happens really quickly. It's at the end of the half. It's a nice break. Tim Weah gets forward. He has tons of space. And by the time he gets the ball, he's able to run it in and just curl it around the keeper, hitting kind of the inside post and bouncing. It's a very satisfying ball. But when he wheels off to celebrate, the flag's already up and Iran have already put the ball back in play. The referees don't signal for VAR. And the angle they show on the broadcast shows that it would be onside. So there's a lot of confusion. Goes to half. They don't really show anything. You had to, if you were a fan watching this that wasn't plugged in to soccer, you would have no idea what happened if you're a kind of casual fan watching at a bar somewhere. I had to go to Stu Holden's Twitter account to find the shot from the booth that showed the angle that they used, but there's still no explanation there. So the angle doesn't show when the ball is played, doesn't show where they're taking the shot, and it even looks a little bit off center from the angle that they're using. So I would have just loved to have an explanation from the VAR official like they usually have of like what exactly they were looking at, because it didn't really check out to me. But I was okay. If VAR says it's offsides, I'm going to go with that. I think usually they have an angle, even if they aren't showing it, and they spend all this time creating the graphics that, I don't think the graphics are very helpful actually. So, but that being said, going to the half, 1-0, and you're feeling good about it. You created some solid chances, even though, some of them could be hit better, but end of the second half, having a good feeling. Now, Pulisic has to come off. He's not able to continue going into the second half. So Brendan Aronson comes in for him to start, and I thought Aronson was fine. I didn't think he was necessarily great or bad one way or the other, but I thought he had a decent game. He had a fine showing for himself. I think it's, anytime you can get a young player like Aronson into a game at this level with this type of intensity, this is the biggest game that US have played since 2012, or 2014, right? 8 years. You can't have a World Cup 10 years ago, 8 years ago. Anytime you can get a young player with that level of experience, it's going to be good for him moving forward. Even if he didn't necessarily put in a great shift, he was respectable, and that's going to be just so good for him down the line to have that level of experience. So outside of that, they couldn't really do much in the second half. And in fact, they let Iran back into the game. Iran had 0 expected goals in the first half. They ended the game with 0.49 expected goals. And most of that coming towards the end of the game when, inexplicably, Greg Berhalter switched from a back 4 to a back 5. So I guess before that, Weston McKennie comes off for Kellen Acosta. Not my ideal sub for Weston McKennie, but I think it helps, especially with Christian Pulisic out of the game. I know Greg Berhalter trusts Kellen Acosta to take corners, take free kicks. Kellen Acosta is better than Christian Pulisic at corners and free kicks. And I think you have him in for that purpose in case you have that opportunity come up. I don't think it's not my ideal sub, but I'm cool with it. And I don't think Weston McKennie is fit enough to play over 70 minutes at this point. I think you see that in the subs. I think you probably have a minutes modifier limit on him at some point, whether that is 70 minutes, whether it's a little bit longer. I definitely don't think he's fit enough to play the 90. You saw this, especially in the Wales game, but a little bit in this game too, that he was kind of laboring with the squad, late into the half. So he's definitely not fully fit yet, and we have to understand that when we're looking at these subs. So the next sub up on the list, you have Haji Wright coming in for Josh Sargent. I thought Sargent had a good game. I know his numbers aren't really going to reflect it, but I thought his hold-up play was great. Created a chance. He probably could have scored, but he just was doing great, kind of tracking back into the midfield and being a man that Weah and Pulisic could then play off of, even though they're making a lot of runs that just weren't kind of realized. But you saw this early in the game where Sargent was coming up to receive the ball and Weah would kind of run in behind, or Pulisic would run in behind, but oftentimes they just weren't hitting that streak, or the run just wasn't being made. So I thought Sargent played fine. He's replaced by Haji Wright. which is weird. I guess not weird when you consider that that's kind of the substitution protocol has been either Sargent in for Wright or Wright in for Sargent. But it just makes you wonder why even bring Jesus Ferreira. This is probably the game where Jesus Ferreira is needed to give you that kind of change in pace, especially if you have someone playing more of a false nine role anyway. So why do you bring him then if you're not going to use him in the situation that would be useful for him to go in? Fine, that is what it is. I'm not going to nitpick too much in a game that advances to the final 16, but I do have qualms with both that sub and Shaq Moore and Walker Zimmerman coming in for Tim Weah and Serginho Dest, which then moves them into a back five. This happening in the 82nd minute, and to this point, Iran had only generated 0.3 expected goals. Within the last 20 minutes, they would come very close to scoring. And I don't necessarily understand coming off of the Wales game where you did bunker down again and you allowed Wales to come back in and tie that game when you need the win, when you have looked best in this game, playing expansive football, getting up and down the field. And, maybe it's a little bit uncomfortable in that you leave things open and you're maybe susceptible to the counterattack, but you're so much more likely to score a second goal in that scenario versus, creating anything off of this defensive scheme that they come up with. And not only that, they back away off, so they let Iran have plenty of time with the ball, have plenty of time looking for decisions. They're not necessarily blocking the corners because they're trying to be cautious. They're not trying to pick up a yellow. They're not trying to give Iran a free kick. And in that instance, there's, I think it was Taremi goes down in our box. He gets the ball past Turner. There's not enough on it. Ream's able to clear it away. But in that play, there is a shout for a penalty against Carter Vickers. Now, Kim Carter Vickers kind of just leaned his hand against the back of Taremi. It wasn't like you pushed him down or pulled him down or anything. It would have been extremely cruel to give that penalty. It's not like the Zimmerman penalty from the other day. But needless to say, you made things a lot more difficult than you had to make them, and I thought Shaq Moore was real bad in this game. I think Shaq Moore gives you some good in some scenarios, but I don't think this is the scenario that I throw him and Walker Zimmerman in at the same time. That being said, that's nitpicky, right? Because you do win 1-0, you do come away with a win, you do advance to the knockout stage. It's just one of those things that kind of leave you scratching your head that, Greg Berhalter is in the job now. He completed the goal. He got them into the round of 16. But there's so many boneheaded decisions where it's like, it's not just me, some guy who played grade school, some high school soccer, criticizing him. It's fellow professionals. It's the players look like they have issues with it at times. And there are these little decisions that make things more heated than they have to be. And I think it's a little bit of Berhalter being inexperienced on the international stage at the World Cup, but he's had plenty of time to grow into that. But there's just things like bringing Jesus Ferreira over Ricardo Pepi, and you don't even use Jesus Ferreira, and you probably could have used Ricardo Pepi's skills, someone that you relied on throughout all of qualifying. We don't need to go over that again, but why even start that battle if you're not going to use Jesus Ferreira then, and bring someone who could actually get some quality out of? You can get, in this scenario, you could use them and be successful with. I don't understand his succession planning, because I think he comes into games, and more often than not, I think he gets games right from the get-go. I think he excels at picking the starting 11. Whatever you say about his overall roster selection, I think he excels at picking the starting 11. He excels at the opening game plan. He excels at the opening formation. Somewhere along the line throughout the game, though, it becomes harder for him to close games out with his decision-making. The switch to the 5 in the back, kind of like getting in your head, right? Thinking that you have to go cautious in order to keep a goal at the back of the net. But good teams all the time keep pouring on the attack to try to get that second goal. This isn't like some blueprint of how you see a game out. In fact, playing conservative more times than not leads to a goal against. You see this all the time in all levels of soccer, all levels of football. And I don't know if it's just because he has this plan that it's so hard for him to go against, but we consistently see substitutions made way too late. We consistently see substitutions made in a way that just does not make sense for anyone who analyzes the game. And even though you get the result here, the team played well in the first half, and the team deserved the result, and the talent level this team has deserved to move on to the knockout stage. At what point does Greg Berhalter get better, though? Would be my question going forward. So those are my concerns. In general, I feel real good about this game. A little bit worried about what happens with Pulisic going forward. I hope, waiting for I'm recording this right after the game, so I don't necessarily know the status of his injury. A little bit concerning that he tried to go forward and they took him out the half. Hopefully that's just a precaution. But not to say that things ride or die on Christian Pulisic, because I think we've gotten to the point as a national team where Tyler Adams, Weston McKennie, Yunus Musa, Anthony Robinson, Sergiño Dest are just as valuable as Christian Pulisic is to this team. So let's go over my player ratings for the starting 11. Then we'll talk a little bit about the game against the Netherlands coming up on Saturday. So starting off, I thought Matt Turner had a great game. Nothing he really did that you could be upset about. Keeps a clean sheet, doesn't really have to make a save. Has a couple high claims, has a couple good throws, was good in his distribution. So that's an A game from Matt Turner, or B game, I think. That's a B game from Matt Turner. He didn't have to make any saves. Tim Ream, Cameron Carter-Vickers, I thought were fantastic. Cameron Carter-Vickers, I think it took him a little bit to kind of grow into this game. You could see early on this game, Tyler Adams was kind of screaming at him to step up a little bit more into the formation. But outside of that, he really grew into this game. And you can see just how strong that guy is on the tackle. And that's maybe where Greg Berhalter gets this right again, is I think Cameron Carter-Vickers for Walker Zimmerman was the right call here. And they said on the broadcast, Greg had mentioned because of CCV's time at Celtic, they're used to playing against teams that play with a low block because Celtic and Rangers are the two teams at the top. And a lot of times when they play teams, they're not playing with the idea they're going to get a lot of possession. So playing a guy who's used to having possession, used to trying to break down a low block, I'm cool with that. I like CCV a lot anyway, but he really proved in this game just how strong he is. I don't know if Walker Zimmerman has as easy of a time winning some of the tackles that Cameron Carter-Vickers did. Tim Ream, I thought, had a fantastic game as well. And this game is kind of the case in point of that, understanding between him and Anthony Robinson that they have. There are a couple passes that Ream makes here that I think only because he knows what Anthony Robinson are going to do, they end up working out. Anthony Robinson, so Ream, Carter-Vickers, I'm giving a B. Dest and Anthony Robinson, I'm giving A's. Those are my men of the match here, along with Tyler Adams when we get to the midfield. But Robinson and Dest both had fantastic games. Dest getting the assist on the goal. Robinson, I thought, at times was our only option to get the ball forward, progressing the ball. So those are A's. I think Tyler Adams, Yunus Musa, moving to the midfield, also had A games. Musa and Adams were both just immense through the midfield, both in clogging up Iran's attack, as well as controlling the ball and, helping progressing the ball forward. Weston McKennie, give him a C. West did not have a good game, and I don't know if that's him laboring. You want his intensity, and for that's why I give him a C. I don't think this was a terrible game, but there were a lot of balls that were mishit. There are a lot of times that, if you had somebody who was a little bit better on the ball, maybe something more would have happened out of the possession. Christian Pulisic, up top, I'm giving him a B+, seeing that he only played the one half, but he did get the game-winning goal, and he put his balls on the line for the team. I couldn't get that out. I couldn't get that line out. I'm sorry. He put his body on the line for the team, and McKennie said in the post-game that, what he did just proves that this team plays for each other, and that anyone on this team would be willing to sacrifice themselves to get this team ahead. So for that, it's a B+. Josh Sargent and Tim Weah. Sargent, I think, even though his numbers don't reflect it, I think I still give him a C+ because his hold-up play was great. I thought, he made some great runs, he made some great recoveries, and defensively he was cool. He was great as well. Tim Weah, kind of the same. C+. I think he had some great runs. some great touches. There are times where balls didn't come off the way that I think he would want them to. Balls weren't weighted how I think he would want them to. And that's why Pulisic gets a lower grade as well, because some of those passes were just ugly. But Weah did almost have that second goal. And if he gets that second goal, that's a different grade for him. So that's kind of what I think of the starters. I already told you what I thought of Shaq Moore. Walker Zimmerman was fine. Walker Zimmerman actually made a kind of clutch tackle at the end of the game, a great clearance at the end of the game, but he only played 15 minutes. Haji Wright, Kellen Acosta, I thought were fine. They also, only playing 13 minutes and 25 minutes collectively, plus stoppage time. So 35 minutes and 23 minutes collectively, but I don't think they really did much to positively impact the game, but they also didn't do anything to negative impact the game as well. So those are kind of my grades. Ultimately, US won or on 0, so on to play the Netherlands. I've kind of talked about the Netherlands in my Dimers recaps, and this is the time to play the Netherlands because outside of Cody Gakpo, kind of ascending to, he's this year's James Rodriguez, let's just say. But being that young player that, really makes himself known outside of Cody Gakpo, they have not had a lot of attacking success. Frankie de Jong got a goal today, but Memphis Depay hasn't had a lot of success. Steven Bergwijn has not had a lot of success. So they haven't looked extremely cohesive. They haven't looked extremely dangerous going forward. And while they get out winning the group, I think this is probably the best time for the U.S. to be facing them. I still think that the U.S. struggle with how the Netherlands want to control the ball. But we saw them do well against England, even though they didn't score. They kept them off the score sheet. And that's all you got to do in the knockouts. If you go to pens, then it's anyone's game. So we'll see what happens going forward. As always, thank you all so much for watching me today. Give me a thumbs up if you're finding this video. If you haven't subscribed to me before, give me a subscribe. I would love it. I would love you forever. Thank you all so much for watching. And as always, we will talk so soon.